Moedim Simcha Rabotai. We are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Pesachim. We are up to Perik Zayin Mishnah Hey. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilun Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana Aranbayev, and Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov, Menuchatam beGan Eden, Amen. The following Mishnah discusses a case in which most of the people are pure, tahor, so that it is forbidden to bring the Korban Pesach in Tumah, in impurity. However, one Pesach became impure before its blood was thrown on the altar to complete its essential service. As we know, the most essential part of any animal offering is throwing its blood on the wall of the altar. Once the blood is thrown, the offering is valid, even if the sacrificial parts are not burnt on the altar. So in the case the Mishnah is going to discuss, the part of the offering that became tameh may not be brought on the altar or eaten. The Mishnah discusses whether the blood service may be completed. Here too, the Mishnah differentiates between a Pesach and other offerings. Nitma basar v'chelev kayam. If after a Pesach was slaughtered, its meat became impure, but its fats and other sacrificial parts which are to be burnt on the altar remain tahor. Now the commentaries explain the sacrificial parts were removed from the animal before the blood had been thrown. The meat then became tameh, which did not affect the sacrificial parts, since they were no longer attached to the animal. Nitma chelev abasar kayam. Eno zorek et adam. The Mishnah says one may not throw the blood on the altar. Now, since the main purpose of a Pesach is to be eaten, as we learned in the previous Mishnah, its blood may be thrown on the altar only when that purpose can be accomplished. Therefore, when the meat is impure and will not be able to be eaten, its blood may not be thrown on the altar. Now, since the blood is not thrown, the offering is never completed, and this animal becomes a disqualified offering. It must therefore be burned in the place where disqualified offerings are destroyed. So again, the Mishnah reads, Nitma basar v'chelev kayam. If its meat became tameh, but its fats remain tahor, eno zorek et adam, one may not throw the blood on the altar. However, nitma chelev v'basar kayam, if the fats and other sacrificial parts became impure, but the meat remains pure, zorek et adam, one throws the blood on the altar. Since the meat will be able to be eaten, the service is completed. Now, the sacrificial parts that became impure may not be offered on the altar and are burned instead in the place where disqualified offerings are destroyed. However, the offering has been validated and the meat may therefore be eaten. The Mishnah now states the law for other offerings. Uba mukdashin enochen. However, for all other sacred offerings, the law is not the same. Ela afal pi shenitma basar v'chelev kayam zorek et adam. Rather, even if the meat became impure and the fats and other sacrificial parts remain pure, one throws the blood on the altar. He then offers the sacrificial parts on the altar while the impure meat is burnt and not eaten. Now, since for other offerings, eating the meat is not the offering's main purpose, the service may be done even if the meat will not be able to be eaten. Therefore, with other offerings, whether the meat became impure and the fats did not, or the fats became impure but the meat did not, the blood may be thrown to validate the offering. However, if both the meat and the fats became impure, the blood may not be thrown, even in the case of other offerings. And that is the end of Mishnah Hey. Mishnah Vav now returns to the subject of a Pesach brought in impurity. The Mishnah explains when it may be brought in that state and when it may not. Nitma kal or rubo, if the whole community of Jews, which the Gemara on page 94b explains that in this context, it refers to the Jews gathered at the temple to bring the Pesach, if they all became impure, or most of the community became impure with corpse tumah, and were not able to become tahor before Erev Pesach. Now the Mishnah, the Rav says, refers only to impurity from a corpse, for that is the only form of tumah that can be overridden to bring the Pesach. The Pesach does not override any other type of tumah, even if the whole community is tameh from it. The Mishnah says, O shayu hakohanim tmeim v'akal teorim, or if the Kohanim were impure, even though the members of the community were pure, ye'aseh b'tumah, the Pesach is brought in a state of tumah. Now, in such a case, the Rav says, even those who are pure need not be careful about avoiding impurity. Now, when the Torah states that a person who is impure in Erev Pesach may not bring the Pesach, it uses a singular expression which implies that this law applies only to individuals. If, however, the community as a whole is tameh, impure, they may bring the Pesach in impurity. Nitma mi'ut hakal, however, if only a minority of the community became impure, hateorin osin et harishon, the people who are pure make the first Pesach, meaning they bring their Pesach offerings on the 14th of Nisan, Erev Pesach, vatmein osin et hasheni, and the people who are impure make the second Pesach, meaning they bring their offerings on the 14th of Iyar, what we call Pesach Sheni, when the Torah provided a second opportunity to bring the Pesach for people who are unable to bring it on Erev Pesach. Now, either because they were tameh or because they were too far from the temple, the Torah gives them the dispensation in Sefer Bamidbar, chapter 9, Pesukim 9 through 11, to bring it on Pesach Sheni, the 14th of Iyar. Now, the laws of Pesach Sheni will be discussed B'ezrat Hashem Bli Neder later on in the Mishnayot in chapter 9, Mishnayot 1 through 3. And that is in Rabotai today's Mishna Yomi. Everybody should have a Moed Sameach. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.